Good morning. You're listening to Baptist for Liberty. I'm your host, Joanna Works, and today is Tuesday, July 22nd. All right, so the week of July 4th, we were looking at some patriotic songs. And one song that I mentioned, but I didn't get to reviewing, was the Battle Hymn of the Republic. Now, earlier this week, Brother McCool posted an article on our Baptist for Liberty Facebook page on the Battle Hymn of the Republic. So I'm going to look at that a little bit today. The article is Undestanding, the Battle Hymn of the Republic, written by Howard Ray White, published July 18th. Very beginning, it starts in the mid-1800s. Women were not to be leaders in politics and religion, but Harriet Beecher Stowe and Julia Ward Howe did just that. Sinclair Lewis would write, Uncle Tom's Cabin was the first evidence to America that no hurricane can be so disastrous to a country as a ruthlessly humanitarian woman. You should know that Julia and Samuel Howe were not Christians as we think of Catholics, Baptists, Methodists, Presbyterians, and so forth. During the 1850s and 1860s, the Howes were in lockstep with most Unitarians of the northeastern state of that era and thereby embraced a very free-thinking, transcendentalist, pretend Christian theology. This writer does not pull punches, apparently. Pretend Christian, wow, yeah, it's true. And, the transcendentalist, New Age is nothing new. Repackaged. Anyway, continuing. As was customary with Unitarians in Massachusetts during that era, the House belief in God and Jesus Christ, as we know it from the Christian Bible, was rather confused with transcendentalism, rationalism, and the doctrine of necessity. Such confused religious belief was commonplace among Massachusetts intellectuals who had embraced the Republican Party. It was from this background that Julia Ward Howe had been inspired to write the lyrics to her Battle Hymn of the Republic. The previous day, while picnicking with her husband and others as they watched a review of Massachusetts troops just outside of Washington City, that's Washington, D.C. During the review, she was captivated by Massachusetts soldiers singing John Brown's Body to a lovely tune that had been composed by South Carolinian William Steph as a Methodist Sunday school and camp meeting song about 5 years earlier. But it seems the review of troops was disturbed by some Confederate soldiers who opened fire on outlying pickets and sent the picnickers scurrying back to the Capitol. It is appropriate to now examine in detail the evolution of and the meaning of the Battle Hymn of the Republic. If you had read Bloodstains, Volume 2, The Demagogues, you will recall that Julia and Samuel Howe had known the terrorist leader John Brown personally, that Brown had visited them in their home in Boston, that Samuel had supported Brown with donations of money for the purchase of weapons and ammunition, that Samuel had fled for a while to Canada upon hearing news of Brown's capture at Harper's Ferry Armory, that Samuel had returned to Massachusetts only after he felt he was immune from imprisonment, that he had been forced to submit to questioning about his involvement before a special committee of the Federal Senate, and that he had lied under oath to the senators to avoid being implicated in a plot of which he was a participant. Yes, Samuel Howe knew John Brown, and he was a fellow conspirator who had given Brown encouragement and money, and his wife Julia, also a dedicated abolitionist activist, had met Brown and admired him. Howe was one of 6 prominent abolitionist political activists who worked together to support John Brown. The others were Theodore Parker of Boston, the famous and very influential Unitarian leader, Gerrit Smith of Peterborough, New York, a bachelor and heir to an immense fortune, Franklin Sanborn of Boston, a bachelor and abolitionist who had become wealthy by marrying a dying woman, George Stearns of Boston, a wealthy lead pipe manufacturer who supported abolitionist causes, and Thomas Higginson of Massachusetts, a full-time abolition political activist with an intense militant attitude. Their most important project had been raising money during the mid-1850s in support of terrorists from the northern states, including John Brown and his gang, who were going or had gone to Kansas Territory to drive out settlers from the southern states. When news arrived of the October 16, 1859 raid on Harper's Ferry Armory by Brown's gang, like how Franklin Sanborn and George Stearns fled to Canada for a while. Theodore Parker, who was very ill at the time over in Italy, hoping to recover, wrote letters praising John Brown's attack and soon thereafter died, and Gerrit Smith became sick with fever and had himself committed to an insane asylum to avoid being implicated. These were the wealthy and influential supporters of John Brown's early terrorist attacks in Kansas Territory and his last attack, that being against the Harper Ferry Armory. And Julia Ward Howe was of the same persuasion and supportive of the efforts of her husband and the other 5 men, although she probably did not know the extent to which they were funding terrorist murderers. I'm not so sure about that last part. This is actually probably the 3rd article on the battle hymn that I read, and so far it goes into a lot more detail on who the Secret Six here that supported John Brown, which I found really good and interesting because in the other articles they mentioned that there were 6 and that Julia Ward Howe and her husband were supporters of John Brown, but they didn't really go into who the other people were or how they evaded any prosecution or charges of these terrorist acts. Okay. Transforming Says Brothers into a Song of Hatred. Now I turn to William Stuff's song, Say Brothers, which Julia Ward Howe appropriated for her battle hymn. William Stuff had composed Say Brothers about 1856. Some sources say 1853. He was a South Carolinian. Some sources say a Virginian, some say a Georgian. The tune and the lyrics were easy to sing and harmonize and were influenced by African American music and folk music traditions. A leader could easily teach the words to a group of singers as they all sang along. The Say Brothers song had become popular at religious revivals, also called camp meetings, and Sunday schools, both among European Americans and African Americans. It seemed to have first become popular around Charleston, South Carolina. Later the song had made its way north and had been picked up by Federal Army soldiers who had changed the words except for the refrain to transform the song into one praising John Brown. Generally speaking, Say Brothers was sung while inviting folks to join the church at the conclusion of a revival meeting. Verse 1. Say, brothers, will you meet us? Say, brothers, will you meet us? Say, brothers, will you meet us on Canaan's happy shore? Refrain. Glory, glory, hallelujah. Glory, glory, hallelujah. Glory, glory, hallelujah. Forever, evermore. Verse 2. By the grace of God we'll meet you. By the grace of God we'll meet you. By the grace of God we'll meet you, where parting is no more. Verse 3. Jesus lives and reigns forever. Jesus lives and reigns forever. Jesus lives and reigns forever on Canaan's happy shore. We see that the above was a pure Christian song and invitation. The hymn is about coming together by the grace of God, believers coming together with loved ones and with Jesus after passing on. It's about brotherly love. It's about gladness and happiness. It's truly aimed to glorify God in accordance with the teachings of Jesus Christ. Glory, glory, hallelujah. John Brown's body. Praise of a terrorist leader. Well, in 1861, 2 years after the conviction and execution of terrorist John Brown, certain federal soldiers who were imbued with an enthusiasm for abolitionism, a hatred of southern states people, and an admiration of Brown, adopted for their militant purposes the Say Brother hymn, resulting is a gory hymn praising their hero. The tune was the same, and the glory, glory, hallelujah was the same, but the meaning was in no way an expression of Christianity. This is the John Brown song. John Brown's body lies a molten in the grave. John Brown's body lies a molten in the grave. John Brown's body lies molding in the grave. his soul is marching on. Glory, glory, hallelujah, etc. His soul is marching on. Remaining verses. The stars of heaven are looking kindly down. The stars of heaven are looking kindly down. The stars of heaven are kindly looking down on the grave of old John Brown. He's gone to be a soldier in the army of the Lord. He's gone to be a soldier in the army of the Lord. He's gone to be a soldier in the army of the Lord. His soul is marching on. John Brown's knapsack is strapped upon his back. John Brown's knapsack is strapped upon his back. John Brown's knapsack is strapped upon his back. His soul is marching on. His pet lambs will meet him on the way. His pet lambs will meet him on the way. His pet lambs will meet him on the way, and they'll go marching on. They will hang Jeff Davis on a sour apple tree. They will hang Jeff Davis on a sour apple tree. They will hang Jeff Davis on a sour apple tree as they go marching on. Like Say Brothers, the song glorifies the terrorist John Brown, is easily taught by a song leader and easily passed along by oral tradition. It expresses the Unitarianism of the time with a touch of Christianity, as it elevates John Brown to a militant angel who is admired by the stars, serves as a soldier in the army of the Lord, returns in spirit form to lead the Federal soldiers called his pet lambs as they push southward in their invasion of Maryland, Kentucky, and Missouri, and that accomplished on into the Confederacy, climaxing with the hanging of President Jeff Davis. We are struck by the free thinking of 1860s Unitarian mind that makes stars into holy beings, glibly transforms a convicted and executed leader of terrorists and murderers like John Brown into a glorious angel, and advances that angel as the leader of federal invasion forces. We also observe that the song is not critical of the seceded states or the bonding of African Americans. That criticism seems to be taken for granted. The Battle Hymn of the Republic, as first written. This was the John Brown song Julia Ward Howe heard Federal soldiers singing as she, her husband, and other picnickers watched a review of Federal troops just outside of Washington City on November 18, 1861. That is before they were destroyed by some Confederate soldiers who opened fire on outlying pickets and sent the picnickers scurrying back to the Capitol. She liked the tune and probably did not know its origin, probably did not know that a man from the southern state had written it, did not know that the lovely tune had been composed by South Carolinian William Steff as a Methodist Sunday school and camp meeting song about 5 years earlier. It seemed to her that Massachusetts soldiers singing the John Brown song symbolized the glory of the coming of the Lord. Okay, I'll stop here and comment on something else. One of the other articles I read when it describes the origins of the Battle Hymn of the Republic was that they knew the song had been rewritten a few times, and there was another abolitionist friend of hers who heard the song and told her, you should write new lyrics for this song. And I don't have the article right in front of me, and I don't remember the name of the abolitionist. I'll post a link to it in the description, though. After recording this, I'll find it. Although she felt the meaning was tremendous, she felt the lyrics were trite and insufficiently inspiring. So that night and the next morning at Willard Hotel in Washington City, she wrote the first version of a new set of lyrics which also drew upon the emotions surrounding John Brown's martyrdom. She titled her set of replacement lyrics The Battle Hymn of the Republic. Here is the Battle Hymn as she first wrote it. Notice how she opens in the first person, witnessing to others about how those Massachusetts troops singing John Brown's Soul is Marching On had inspired her to believe she had seen the glory of the coming of the Lord. Verse 1. Mine eyes have seen the glory of the coming of the Lord. He is trampling out the winepress, where the grapes of wrath are stored. He hath loosed the fateful lightnings of his terrible swift sword. His truth is marching on. Chorus. Glory, glory, hallelujah. Glory, glory, hallelujah. Glory, glory, hallelujah. His truth is marching on. Remaining verses. I have seen him in the watchfires of 100 circling camps, They have builded him an altar in the evening dews and damps. I can read his righteous sentence by the dim and flaring lamps. His day is marching on. I have read a burning gospel written fiery rows of steel. As ye deal with my contemners, so with you my grace shall deal. Let the hero born of woman crush the serpent with his heel. O God is marching on. Our God is marching on is the lyric. He has sounded out the trumpet that shall never recall retreat. He has waked the earth's dull sorrow with a high ecstatic beat. O be swift, my soul, to answer him. Be jubilant, my feet. Our God is marching on. In the whiteness of the lilies he was born across the sea, with a glory in his bosom that shines out on you and me. As he died to make men holy, let us die to make men free. Our God is marching on. He is coming like the glory of the morning on the wave. He is wisdom to the mighty. He is succor to the brave. Succor to the brave. So the world shall be his footstool, and the soul of time his slave. Our God is marching on. The Battle Hymn of the Republic as published. This version of Julia Ward Howe's lyrics was passed among some friends. Publication was arranged on the February 1st, 1862 issue of the Atlantic Monthly magazine, on the front cover no less. Before publication, Howe and others modified the words a bit. The published version became the official set of lyrics. Here is the Battle Hymn as it was published. Mine eyes have seen the glory of the coming of the Lord. He is trampling out the vintage where the grapes of wrath are stored. He hath loosed the fateful lightning of his terrible swift sword. His truth is marching on. Chorus is the same. Remaining verses. I have seen him in the watchfires of 100 circling camps. They have builded him an altar in the evening dews and damps. I can read his righteous sentence by the dim and flaring lamps. His day is marching on. I have read a fiery gospel written burnished row of steel. As ye deal with my contemners, so with you my grace shall deal. Let the hero born of woman crush the serpent with his heel, since God is marching on. He has sounded forth the trumpet, thou shalt never call retreat. He is sifting out the hearts of men before his judgment seat. O be swift, my soul, to answer him. Be jubilant, my feet. Our God is marching on. In the beauty of the lilies, Christ was born across the sea, with a glory in his bosom that transfigures you and me. As he died to make men holy, let us die to make men free, while God is marching on. All this time, it is appropriate to examine in detail It is appropriate to examine in detail the evolution of and the meaning of the Battle Hymn of the Republic. The Howes and most of their friends were Unitarians and thereby embraced its free-thinking pretend Christian theology. As was customary with Unitarians, the Howes' belief in God and Jesus Christ as presented in the Christian Bible was rather confused with transcendentalism, rationalism, and the doctrine of necessity. Such confused religious beliefs was commonplace among intellectuals who embraced the Republican Party. This is a rather repeat of an earlier paragraph, but I'll continue. We need to understand this as we examine the lyrics. We also need to understand the remarkable extent to which Unitarians and Northern state Christians leaders from the northeastern states westward along the Great Lakes glorified John Brown after his gang's rather foolish terrorist attack at the Harper's Ferry Armory in Northern Virginia made him into a heroic martyr, even likened him to Jesus Christ. You may want to review this history as told in my epic history from which this booklet is drawn. Bloodstains, Volume 2, The Demigods. Understanding what the Battle Hymn is saying. The words of the first verse appear to have been inspired by hearing the John Brown song the previous day, especially the third verse, "He is gone to be a soldier in the army of the Lord." It was there the previous day that mine eyes, that is, Julia Ward Howe's eyes saw the glory, and it is easy to believe that it is the martyrdom of John Brown that is trampling out the winepress and attacking with his horrible swift sword that John Brown's truth is marching on. You see, the his is not capitalized, but in the edited version of the Battle Hymn published in February 1862, his is changed to his, capitalized, to switch the meaning from John Brown's terrible swift sword to God's terrible swift sword. Since his begins the last line of the verse, we cannot tell if she is talking about God's truth or John Brown's truth, but it is not hard to assume she means John Brown's truth. The words of the second verse readily suggest that Julia Ward Howe, she is the first person, she is the I, sees John Brown in the 100 circling camps and sees soldiers building an altar to John Brown or to his alleged spirit, this being evident by the use of a lowercase him instead of a capitalized him. Again, in line 3, she uses a lowercase him to specify that the righteous sentence of death to Confederates is seen as being handed down by the spirit of John Brown, but John Brown's presence would become obscured from verse 2 before publication in February, as the him, lowercase, would be replaced with him, uppercase. Yet, can anyone doubt that his day, uppercase, is John Brown's day, that John Brown's day is marching on? The words of the third verse suggest that Julia Ward Howe, again, she is the first person, she is the I, has read the letters and proclamations of John Brown and is equating them to a fiery gospel, and seeing them written in fiery or burnished rows of steel, which reminds us of the 1,000 steel-tipped wooden spears that John Brown's small gang had on hand during his terrorist attack on Harper Ferry Armory. The second line mentions my contemners or contemners. A contemner is a despiser and a scorner who treats his adversary as if he is mean and despicable. So the second line means this: as ye Federal soldiers deal with my contemners, Confederate defenders, so with you, Federal soldiers, my John Brown's grace shall deal. You see, I find no evidence that she is invoking God's grace. She must be invoking grace dispensed by John Brown's spirit. Notice that nothing in that line was changed in the edit for publication. In the third line, hero born of woman seems to mean John Brown, the hero. The serpent seems to mean the Confederacy and the practice of bonding African Americans. Of course, the devil is often called the serpent in the Bible, but I do not see the devil being invoked in this set of lyrics. We are also tempted to see John Brown in the third line because he would be removed from it during the edit prior to publication. The line would be changed to let the hero born of woman. The capitalization of hero serves to transfer the meaning from John Brown to Jesus Christ. Then the verse closes with our God is marching on. Perhaps it is Howe's Unitarian thinking that claims our God is different from the God to which many Confederates prayed. Prior to publication, our God was changed to since God to complement the capitalization of hero. So we see in the third verse that there was clearly an initial attempt to glorify, even deify John Brown, and that this was abandoned before publication. I think these are interesting points. In the previous articles I read, it didn't so much tie it into John Brown being deified so much as just a complete twisting of God's grace, and that, God, in the New Testament, it talks about Christians being soldiers. But it also refers to us, and we don't wrestle with flesh and blood, but we're in a spiritual warfare. And the Unitarians took the metaphoric, spiritual warfare and twisted it into a physical, literal warfare. But I think this author makes some very good points in dissecting the lyrics and how it deifies John Brown. The next paragraph starts, John Brown is clearly the mover and shaker in the fourth verse. Surely it was John Brown who sounded out the trumpet that shall never call retreat, and has waked the earth's dull sorrow with a high ecstatic beat. Julia Ward Howe is crediting John Brown with starting the crusade that she sees unfolding before her eyes, the holy military crusade aimed southward. She equates the political and personal sins of Southern states society to earth's dull sorrow, and John Brown's assault upon it as a high ecstatic beat. Ecstatic is derived from ecstasy, pertaining to or resulting from ecstasy, being delightful beyond measure. Then Howe admonishes herself and singers of the lyrics as well to be swift to answer him, that is, be swift to answer John Brown's call to battle, and be jubilant over the opportunity to so crusade. She closes with references again to our God, inferring that the people of the Southern states have some other God, but this obvious calling to follow John Brown to battle would be seriously edited before Howe's lyrics would be published in February. The second line would be completely rewritten to become, He is sifting out the hearts of men before his judgment seat, and in the third line, him would become him, uppercase, thereby removing John Brown and suggesting that God or Jesus Christ is sifting out the hearts and sitting in his judgment seat. As originally written, the fifth verse continues the deification of John Brown. In the whiteness of the lilies he was born across the sea, painting an image of Christ like John Brown being carried across a vast span, such as being carried from earth to heaven. The reference is not to Christ because he is not capitalized. Born, also sometimes spelled born, B-O-R-N-E, is the past participle of bear and has potentially far more meaning than giving birth to a baby. Anyway, what is the point of mentioning that Jesus Christ was born in Bethlehem beyond the far shore of the Atlantic Ocean? Furthermore, John Brown is pictured as being carried from earth to heaven, with a glory in his bosom that shines out on you and me. Clearly, the terrorist leader is being carried to heaven by angels, his soul being filled with a glory that shines its light down upon the people of the northern states, like a bright star, offering encouragement that they join his spirit in the Holy Crusade. Equating John Brown to Jesus Christ reaches a crescendo in the third line, where Howe had written, As he died to make men holy, let us die to make men free. Again we see he lowercase, not he uppercase. Anyway, Jesus Christ did not die to make bonded people independent. He died for their sins and other people's sins to symbolize God's grace. Again, the God that is seen marching on is our God, somehow different from other people's God. But before this verse would be published in February, the meaning would be inverted. Jesus Christ would replace John Brown. The wording would then seem strange and forced, as it would become, In the beauty of the lilies, Christ was born across the sea, with a glory in his bosom that transfigures you and me. This message now strikes me as silly and without pertinence. But did the editors also goof and overlook two capitalizations? Why did they not capitalize his bosom and he died? Perhaps that was an oversight. The sixth verse would not be published in February 1862. It would be discarded for good. It can be read with the he lowercase representing John Brown or Jesus Christ or God. In any event, it speaks of an awesome power in support of the federal armies. I do not know what it meant by the soul of time is his slave. Whose slave? Why is time capitalized? In any event, it is apparent that Julia Ward Howe was determined to end her lyrics with the word slave, and that she did. But alas, the editing process would strike out the sixth verse entirely. That verse would not be published in February. We said that Julia Ward Howe's intent was to write a variation of the John Brown song she had heard the day before, but with a much more literary and glorious message, one that would be too complex to pass along orally in sing-alongs, but one that would be enduring in published form and advance the moral cause of the crusade she saw gaining momentum. But what of the meaning? Whether the lyrics glorify John Brown or glorify Jesus Christ, the allegation is clearly that God, our God, the God of the northern states, is in lockstep with the federal army as it fights to subjugate Maryland, Kentucky, and Missouri, and then march on southward to conquer the seceded states of the Confederacy. It clearly condemns the people of those states as being sinful and deserving of the wrath of God. It clearly adorns the federal army with the holy task of inflicting God's wrath upon its intended victim. It clearly advocates a holy crusade against the infidels. This brings me to a conclusion that I wish to share with you. Here's a question for you. In our present day representative democracy, why must the descendants of subjugated Maryland, Kentucky, and Missouri, and the descendants of the Confederate States suffer through the Battle Hymn of the Republic on patriotic occasions? This is a song that justifies the killing of 360,000 Federals and glorifies the killing of 260,000 Confederates, that being required to consummate the conquest of the southern states, to conquer a people who only wanted to be left alone to govern themselves, a right the federal Constitution had at that time granted to each state. This is a song that glorifies the military conquest of one half of the states by the people of the other half, a war that escalated into a scorched earth policy where Federals destroyed farms and livestock, laying waste to the southern economy and the southern landscape. This is a song about a political civil war between Republicans and Democrats. This is not a song that honors the defeat of an invading army. Far from it. It is a song praising and urging on that invading army. Why not sing Say Brother instead? If we Americans today wish to ease the pain and suffering of that history, we ought not to be pouring salt into the old wounds. Performances of the Battle Hymn of the Republic ought to be banned as unfit for a nation that seeks a united citizenry. The lyrics and tune of Say Brother, attributed to William Steff of South Carolina, is wonderful. If folks want to sing that lovely tune, especially in full chorus when it is the most magnificent, then encourage them, sing instead with those old words of brotherly love. Encourage them to sing, Say Brother, will you meet us? Say brother, will you meet us? Say brother, will you meet us on Canaan's happy shore? Continues with the rest of the lyrics. That's a song about coming together, about happiness. I prefer to sing songs about coming together, about happiness. There is enough hatred and killing in this world, past and present, without glorifying it in song. And why not sing Dixie too? Unlike the battle hymn, Dixie, the most popular song among the defenders of the Confederacy, is a happy song about home. Yet Dixie is today effectively banned from public performance, while the Battle Hymn of the Republic is embraced as supposedly wholesome, uplifting, and patriotic. Here are the lyrics to Dixie without the original minstrel dialect. Oh, I wish I was in the land of cotton, old times there are not forgotten. Look away, look away, look away, Dixieland. In Dixieland, where I was born early on one frosty morn, look away, look away, look away, Dixieland. Oh, I wish I was in Dixieland, hooray, hooray, in Dixieland. I'll take my stand to live and die in Dixieland, away, away, away down south in Dixieland. Frankly, as a nation today, we ought to be proudly singing Dixie as a regional song and reverently singing Say Brothers as a national song, while we relegate the Battle Hymn of the Republic to historical libraries and museums to be occasionally sung to students who are trying to understand how civil wars get started and get sustained. Okay. On the issue of singing it with proudly. No, we don't need to be singing with pride. Pride is a sin, folks. But singing it as an original song, appreciating it for what it is, yes. And the Say Brothers, that's a good song. It's a good tune. I think a lot of people like the Battle Hymn of the Republic because of the tune, especially. Let's see, concluding remarks. I can only hope my essay on these songs has helped you sort out the issues related to them, the attitudes that cause and sustain the war between the states, and the trouble we have today in teaching its truthful history. We must always remember that the federal invasion of the Confederacy in violation of federal constitution, which then did not disallow state secession, killed 360,000 federal invaders and 260,000 Confederate defenders. Thinking of those dead, what guidance should we acquire from our new understanding of, say, Brother John Brown's body and the Battle Hymn of the Republic? References for understanding the Battle Hymn of the Republic, and it gives a list of references here. I think it was a very good, detailed, articulated article. I find myself having trouble with some of the points here, and I'm not sure how to articulate my thoughts on this. It's hard to grasp and hang on to a thought while reading through. If we Americans today wish to ease the pain and suffering of that history, we ought not to be pouring salt into the old wounds. For one thing, the banning from public. I'm not for banning things necessarily. Take personal responsibility and make a personal decision that you're not going to sing that. In your church, you can vote and agree not to sing the Battle Hymn of the Republic in church service. You could share and educate people why you don't sing that song. But outright banning it, I can't really get behind that. If somebody wants to sing it with full knowledge or in complete ignorance, well, that's their choice. As national bands or something goes, yeah, that would be nice if, our armies, those are the ones that sing the Battle Hymn of the Republic, especially, is usually the military bands, and sing that at 4th of July or other special occasions. Refuse to listen to it, or go listen to the bands until they stop playing it or something. That, I guess, was my only thoughts on that right now. Oh, and once again, we went way, way over our time. I thought at one point about making the show an hour long, and I'm like, no, because if I do an hour long, then I'm going to run out of stuff to say. Yeah, right. Okay, so we're going to move on and close our program today with the reading of scriptures. We're on Proverbs chapter 22 today. A good name is rather to be chosen than great riches, and loving favor rather than silver and gold. The rich and the poor meet together. The Lord is the maker of them all. A prudent man foreseeth the evil, and hideth himself, but the simple pass on, and are punished. By humility and the fear of the Lord are riches and honor and life. Thorns and snares are in the way of the froward. He that doth keep his soul shall be far from them. Train up a child in the way he should go, and when he is old he will not depart from it. The rich ruleth over the poor, and the borrower is servant to the lender. He that soweth iniquity shall reap vanity, and the rod of his anger shall fail. He that hath a bountiful eye shall be blessed, for he giveth of his bread to the poor. Cast out the scorner, and contention shall go out. Yea, strife and reproach shall cease. He that loveth pureness of heart, for the grace of his lips the king shall be his friend. The eyes of the Lord preserve knowledge, and he overthroweth the words of the transgressor. The slothful man saith, This is a lion without. I shall be slain in the streets. The mouth of a strange woman is a deep pit. He that is abhorred of the Lord shall fall therein. Foolishness is bound in the heart of a child, but the rod of correction shall drive it far from him. He that oppresseth the poor to increase his riches, and he that giveth to the rich shall surely come to want. Bow down thine ear, and hear the words of the wise, and apply thine heart unto my knowledge. For it is a pleasant thing if thou keep them within thee. They shall withal be fitted in thy lips. That thy trust may be in the Lord, I have made known to thee thy day even to thee. Have not I written to thee excellent things in counsels and knowledge, that I might make thee know the certainty of the words of truth, that thou mightest answer the words of truth to them that send unto thee. Rob not the poor because he is poor, neither oppress the afflicted in the gate, for the Lord will plead their cause, and spoil the soul of those that spoil them. Make no friendship with an angry man, and with a furious man thou shalt not go, lest thou learn his ways, and get a snare to thy soul. Be not thou one of them that strike hands, or of them that are sureties for debts. If thou hast nothing to pay, why should he take away thy bed from under thee? Remove not the ancient landmarks which thy fathers have set. Seest thou a man diligent in his business? He shall stand before kings, he shall not stand before mean men.